In the small yet beautiful village of Okon, there lived a beautiful girl named Ne. Ne was a young girl from a humble background, and she lived with her parents and two sisters. While Ne's father was a fisherman, Ne's mother was a fish seller who sold her husband's catch at their local market. It was through this joint business that Ne's parents could afford to take care of Ne and her sisters. When Ne was born, she had a very fair and attractive complexion, even though neither of her parents was fair. Because of her unexplainable fair complexion, the villagers of Okon believed that Ne must have inherited her beauty from their sea goddess. So everyone who came across Ne always treated her with respect and love. Because of Ne's fair complexion and beauty, she had many admirers and could easily catch the attention of both young and old men. However, when Ne turned 16, many men began to go to Ne's parents to ask for Ne's hand in marriage because they believed she was ripe for marriage. Even though Ne knew that she was beautiful and attractive, she was very hardworking. She never disrespected her elders and would politely turn down all her suitors. The reason Ne did not want to get married at such a young age was that she wanted to go to university badly. Since childhood, Ne had dreamt of attending university and becoming a teacher. However, due to her parents' modest income from their business, they could not afford to send Ne and her sisters to university. For 2 years, Ne continued to reject her suitors because she knew that marriage and motherhood would hinder her dreams. It wasn't until Okon showed up, who had come to ask for Ne's hand in marriage, promising he would send Ne to the university after she agreed to marry him. Okon, the only son of a rich and famous politician in Okon, had just returned from studying overseas. Unlike the other men who had come for Ne's hand in marriage, Ne loved Okon for many reasons. She loved Okon because he was young and handsome. He spoke fluently and looked intelligent. And most importantly, he was the kind of man she had always dreamed of marrying. Okon, on the other hand, loved Ne too. He saw Ne as a young and naive girl who had so much to learn. And he loved the fact that she was so humble and respectful despite being so beautiful. In less than 2 months of Okon declaring his interest in Ne, the two lovers got married and Ne moved into Okon's family house. Getting married to Okon and moving into his family house was a thing of happiness for Ne, and she was so excited that she would finally go to university. Little did Ne know that her mother-in-law would become a stumbling block to her marriage and dreams. From the first time Ne met Okon's mother, she could sense that Okon's mother did not like her. Out of concern, Ne talked to Okon about his mother's attitude towards her, but Okon convinced her that his mother would grow fond of her as they got to know each other better. Exactly a week after Ne and Okon returned from their honeymoon, Ne began to experience verbal abuse and emotional torture at the hands of her mother-in-law. It started with Ne's mother-in-law constantly complaining about Ne's cooking. She would always complain that Ne's food was either too salty, bland, or pepperish, even when the food tasted great to everyone else. If Ne tried to explain that she had cooked the food just as her mother had taught her mother-in-law would insult Ne's mother and call her all sorts of degrading names. Whenever this happened, Ne would lose her appetite and go to her room to cry. This continued for a long time, and despite seeing how hurt Ne was, Okon never tried to talk to his mother because he didn't want to hurt his mother's feelings. As if constantly complaining about Ne's cooking was not enough, her mother-in-law would ask Ne to do all kinds of degrading chores. For example, instead of allowing the maids to sweep and clean the big house and compound, she would ask Ne to sweep and clean their big house and compound just to punish her. She would also bring out a pile of clean and dirty clothes and would ask Ne to hand wash them without the help of the maids. Since Ne was used to sweeping and cleaning her father's house, she didn't see cleaning and sweeping Okon's family compound as a big deal. Instead of grumbling or frowning, as Ne's mother-in-law expected, she would sing and smile while sweeping, which always infuriated Ne's mother-in-law. Also, every time Ne's mother-in-law saw Ne resting, she would yell at Ne and remind her that her son, Okon, did not spend all that money to marry Ne to come and stay idle. At the slightest provocation, Ne's mother-in-law would remind Ne that she was the daughter of a nobody, so she couldn't think she was better than the maids in her house. For 1 year, Ne endured her bitter mother-in-law, and despite all the maltreatment she got from her mother-in-law, Ne still tried her best to please her, but nothing she did was good enough. Concerning Ne's education, Okon was ready to fulfill his promise of sending Ne to the university. But just as he was making plans for Ne to begin, Ne's mother-in-law got involved. Ne's mother-in-law kicked against the idea of Okon sending Ne to the university, claiming that women like Ne were only good in the kitchen and the bedroom. But despite everything she said, Okon was adamant that he wanted to fulfill his promise to Ne because he loved her. Seeing that Okon was determined, his mother insisted that Okon should only send Ne to school after she had birthed him a son. That way, they would be sure that Ne would not try to act smart after she completed her studies. Even though Okon did not like the idea of Ne giving birth before going to the university, he was forced to listen to his mother. By this time, 1 year had passed since their marriage, and Ne had not gotten pregnant yet. When Ne heard of the new condition concerning her education, she was heartbroken and felt tricked. That day, Ne returned to her poor parents' house and cried her heart out to her mother. She thought of leaving Okon and returning to her parents' house, but her mother frowned against the idea of Ne leaving the husband's house because of that simple misunderstanding. When Ne returned to Okon's family house, she painstakingly told Okon and her mother-in-law that she had agreed to their condition, with the expectation that she would get pregnant soon. For the remainder of that year, Ne tried her best to get pregnant, but nothing happened. The following year, she tried everything she knew that could help her conceive, including herbs, medications, and so much more, but it didn't yield any results. When the 3rd year had passed and Ne's efforts to conceive proved futile, Her mother-in-law made the house a living hell for Ne. She would call Ne barren and humiliate Ne in front of people. Then she threatened Ne that if Ne did not give birth to a boy child by the 4th year of her marriage, she would send Ne back to her father's house and marry a new wife for Okon. This was heart-shattering news for Ne because she knew her mother-in-law did not like her and she was capable of sending Ne back to her father's house. Every night, Ne would cry to God, asking for a child. She knew that she desperately needed a son because it wasn't just her education that was at stake, but her marriage was at stake too. Okon tried his best to console Ne, and he assured her he would never marry another wife, even if they could not bear a child. Truly, Okon's words brought peace and reassurance to Ne, but deep down, she was not happy. Unfortunately, the 4th year passed and Ne could not bear a child. By this time, she had visited all the medicine houses in Oron and the neighboring villages, but none of them could offer a solution. Even the doctors told Ne that she was medically fit to bear a child and couldn't find a problem with her. Sadly, what Ne feared the most happened. One hot afternoon, Ne returned from the market to meet a beautiful dark girl in Okon's house. At first, she thought the girl was one of Okon's cousins, but when Ne spoke to the girl, she realized that the girl was about to become her co-wife. Ne's mother-in-law married another girl for Okon without Okon's knowledge, and the girl brought all her belongings to live with Okon. For the following months, Ne watched as her mother-in-law turned Okon's new wife into her enemy. When Okon's new wife moved in with Ne and Okon, she treated and spoke to Ne with respect. But as time passed, the respect faded because of all the things Ne's mother-in-law told the girl. Things got worse for Ne when Okon started doing the bidding for his mother, and he eventually impregnated his new wife. When it was confirmed that Okon's new wife was pregnant, Ne's mother-in-law literally turned Ne into the new wife's slave, and she would even order Ne to wash her co-wife's clothes and underwear, as well as cook for her at odd hours of the night. If Ne tried to refuse, her mother-in-law would abuse her and remind her of her infertility. 9 months later, Okon's new wife gave birth to a baby girl, but Ne was not allowed to touch or even carry the baby because her mother-in-law claimed Ne was a witch, and the reason Ne couldn't bear any child was because she had spiritually eaten all the babies in her womb. To Ne, this was the final straw, so she packed some of her belongings without thinking twice and returned to her father's house. Worse, Okon was slowly ignoring her and focusing more on his new wife, which always made Ne feel like she was all alone. Upon returning to her father's house, Ne expected Okon to come and beg her to return, but he never did. The first 2 months passed, and there was no sign of Okon or his family members. Instead, Ne heard rumors that Okon had brought a piece of land for his new wife as a gift for giving birth. Meanwhile, while Ne was in her father's house, she fell sick, not knowing that she was pregnant. It was the first time Ne had gotten pregnant in almost 5 years, and when she realized that she was pregnant, she could not contain her joy. As soon as Ne's parents knew that she was pregnant, they insisted that she return to her husband's house, but Ne refused. She had gone through a lot at the hands of Okon's new wife and her mother-in-law, so all she wanted was to give birth safely and take good care of her baby. While Ne remained in her father's house, her parents and sisters treated her with so much love and supported her throughout her pregnancy. 9 months later, to everyone's greatest surprise, Ne gave birth to twins, 2 boys, and she could not believe it. Ne felt like God had rewarded her for all the years of waiting, and she was determined to raise her children by herself. Ne did not know that the news of her twin boys had reached Okon and his family, and as soon as they had it, they came to confirm if it was true. When Okon confirmed that the news was true, he begged Ne to move back to his family house and that he would do whatever she wanted. At first, Ne refused because she was severely hurt and Okon had betrayed her. But after a lot of persuasion from both her family and Okon's family, Ne agreed to move back with Okon on the condition that Okon would rent a new house for them to live in, so she wouldn't have to deal with her mother-in-law anymore. Out of desperation, Okon agreed and did as Ne had requested. He loved Ne, but had allowed his mother to manipulate him and turn him against her. 2 weeks after giving birth, Ne and Okon moved into their new house, and she lived happily with her husband and sons until they were grown enough for Ne to go to university. As promised, Okon sponsored his wife to the university and supported her in every way he could. Years later, Ne graduated at the top of her class and became a secondary school teacher, just as she had always dreamed of.